This video is brought to you by 3, bringing you 4G at no extra cost and some exclusive deals over at btech.com.
Hey guys, welcome to BTech. Basil here with a Sony Xperia Z2 finally posting our full review. You've all asked, why haven't you posted your full review yet? Other sites have posted their full review. Well, you guys are going to get this phone, and if you do buy it, you're going to buy it for about a year at least, 2 years if you're in the UK buying it on a contract. We wanted to make sure we had at least a full week and then some to put it through its paces and make sure there were no bugs that were left unnoticed. Indeed, after a week of using it, we figured out that the camera can overheat every now and then in augmented reality mode, at least on ours. So that's why we do what we do. All we ask of you is that you have patience and you enjoy our reviews and find them useful. Without talking any more about that, enjoy our Sony Xperia Z2 review. The Xperia Z2 adopts Sony's omni-balanced design ethos. It looks good, it feels good, it's classical. Angles, you've got glass front and back. All these were introduced in the Xperia Z, the original, and many of you will be upgrading to the Z2 from the Z. It makes sense that we put them in side by side and tell you just some key differences so that you know why this is probably one of the most worthy upgrades of all time. First of all, you've got an exposed 3.5mm headphone jack on here up at the top. You've also got camera button, two-stage camera button, so you can use this thing underwater. It's also got fantastic speakers and a brilliant screen, not to mention sterling battery life, which the original Z didn't have. As for a size comparison, you can see it is larger. It isn't really wider or much wider, but it's definitely longer, a longer device. Definitely worth those additional millimeters though when you stack up all the things this does, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves. You have that to look forward to later. We'll kick off by finishing talking about the design. Right-hand side is a micro SD card slot, a power button and a volume rocker. You've also got a two-stage camera button which rocks. At the base, in-call microphone and a lanyard connector. On the left-hand side, magnetic dock connector, micro USB port and a micro SIM slot underneath flap, that exposed headphone jack we were telling you about, and a noise-cancelling microphone. At the back is a Sony logo and a 20.7 megapixel camera, as well as a flash and an NFC point as well. All in all, it feels really solid in the hand. The angles are going to dig into the heel of your hand ever so slightly, and if you do have smaller hands, in fact even if you've got larger hands, you're just not going to make that top left hand or top right hand corner holding this one-handed. But still, it's a really premium feeling phone. We can imagine pulling the black one out of a business suit, we can imagine pulling the white one out of a sports bag or a handbag, and it just looking the business. We have an HTC One, a Samsung Galaxy S5 and a Sony Xperia Z2. Now the Sony Xperia Z2 is an IPS panel, Super AMOLED panel for the Samsung Galaxy S5 and it's SLCD3 panel on the HTC One. As far as what you can see right now goes, off angle, the Samsung Galaxy S5 kind of nails it. It beats out the HTC One, and the Sony Xperia Z2 comes last just because you can't see as much vibrancy or punch from that display, even though all three are set to full brightness. If we pull it in closer to frame though, all of that changes. Head on, the Xperia Z2 is fantastic. It's worth saying, viewing angles don't degrade in terms of integrity, the color integrity off angle. This is a much better panel than its predecessor, the Z1. It just doesn't have as strong angles as the other phones do. What you can see when we pull the HTC One into frame is the fact the Sony Xperia Z2 doesn't have quite as on-point white balance, but the colors are much punchier. Both phones pretty accurate in terms of colors, but the HTC One just kind of nails the whites a little bit more. The Sony Xperia Z2 would maybe look a little bit better for videos, etc., whereas the HTC One might look slightly better for web browsing. If we pull in the Samsung Galaxy S5, we can see that the red is much more accurate on the Sony Xperia Z2. And all in all, both deliver a huge amount of punch. The AMOLED display delivers much deeper blacks, but you've got more differentiation across color tones on the Sony Xperia Z2. Any gripes we might have with white balance on the Sony Xperia Z2 by default when compared to the HTC One though are relatively meaningless, because if we jump into the settings, we can jump into the display settings, and we can see Sony has included a white balance control, which is fantastic. So you can really customize this to exactly how your eye works. Really strong advantage that the Z2 has in terms of the display, something we wish all of the displays adopted. So all in all, it really is going to depend on what you want from your display, but we would say for off-angle viewing, the Samsung Galaxy S5 probably nails it. The HTC One default white balance just delivers a much more subdued, slightly more realistic color palette gamut, whereas the Sony Xperia Z2 is the most customizable, has the largest, most immersive display, probably make for the best screen experience in terms of movies and photos by default. Android 4.4.2 sits inside the Xperia Z2. New version of Android. You've got a lot of really nice stock enhancements over Sony's Xperia user interface. Pull down the notifications tray, for example, notifications on the left-hand side, quick settings on the right, also accessible with a 2-finger swipe down. You can now access a lot more of these quick toggles, up to I think it's about 20 or something. If we jump into the edit menu, you can see all of these virtually can be selected. Also, if we pull down the notifications tray and tap quick settings, long press on one of these and you can access a respective setting in the menu, which is really great for time saving. Jumping back home, and you can see you've also got home screens which we can pinch out and add new elements to. Here you can also tweak widgets, applications, wallpapers and themes. Tweaking themes also brings us onto Air, which is Sony's new look and feel. You've got this live wallpaper which is super elegant, feels really slick and expensive. Pulling into the applications tray, and we've customized our applications tray like so you can immediately see you can access things in folders. You can also swap out to alphabetical, and if we pull right back, most used and installed. And if you want to jump back to your own order, it'll remember your settings, which is perfect. Swipe back again, you can also access the Google Play Store and Sony Select. Sony Select is a curation service. Sony curates a few applications that it thinks is going to be perfect for your Xperia Z2. There's also something called What's New. If we pull up, we can see it's on the left-hand side of our Google Now menu. We really don't like that it's here. It's a fair enough service if you're sold into Sony's services in general. You can access video unlimited and music unlimited content, as well as PlayStation content too. Not to mention applications as well, like the ones found in the Sony Select store. Having said that, habitually we're so used to just swiping up and saying okay Google, the having to swipe up and right and the shared space between these two, when this is nowhere near as useful as this, just makes it a little bit of a bugbear. All in all though, the user experience gets a massive thumbs up. Obviously it opens you up to the Google Play Store. Sony has bundled this thing full of Sony applications. Some are bloatware, or feel like bloatware at least, but when you actually delve into them you'll realize most of them are actually relatively useful. Xperia Link, for example, is perfect if you've got a tablet, enabling you to access Wi-Fi tethering on your phone without even having to touch your phone, just via your tablet. And obviously anyone with a PlayStation will appreciate the PlayStation app, and Smart Connect helps you connect stuff and activate stuff in a more automated way. So all in all, like we said, very good. Access to the Google Play Store means you'll get loads and loads of apps and games and multimedia on here. And speaking of, that brings us onto multimedia right now. It makes sense to kick off talking about multimedia by talking about that camera, 20.7 megapixels f2 lens. You've also got a physical camera button as well. Fantastic, because it means you can just fire up the phone, take a very quick picture, and the picture that you take, odds are, is going to look very good, because like we said, this thing has a very good camera sensor and it performs very well. Image stabilization is digital, but it does a sterling job of nailing the shot 9 times out of 10. We can actually talk about some of the shooting modes now, and we've got Superior Auto, manual 4K video, as well as time shift video, background defocus, AR effect, creative effect, fine, info eye, time shift burst, social live, sweep panorama and Evernote. So no shortage of modes, and what's more, you can actually get more by clicking that little plus in the top right hand corner. Superior Auto shoots 8 megapixel images. Manual can shoot up to 21.7. The reason we actually prefer Superior Auto is because their file sizes are much smaller, and there isn't really that much of a trade-off in terms of image quality. In fact, in automatic mode, complete automatic mode, it's got much more accurate white balance. If we jump into manual though, you can see you've got a lot of other things that you can tweak. If we jump into scene, you can, if you're shooting an 8 megapixel image, change the scene as you would with a compact camera. You can also control white balance and ISO. Control flash with auto, fill flash, red eye reduction, no flash or have a torch, so it's a permanent flash, front facing camera, and you can do things like control HDR, ISO, image stabilizer and metering on here. It's worth noting that in Superior Auto, HDR is automated, so it will fire up if it thinks it needs to, which will really help your pictures and help anyone who wants a really simple point and shoot camera out a lot. You've also got 4K video. We can tap through on that, record some 4K video, and we can see just pulling something else into frame, our Xperia Z1 Compact for example, 4K video, will it refocus? Yeah, the macro functionality on 4K video is stupendous. It really does nail it. As does full HD video, but the nice thing about 4K video is once you've actually recorded the video, you can play it back and zoom in on elements without losing any of that detail. What do we mean? Well, we've got a full HD screen on here. We can zoom in and retain that full HD resolution because we're actually recording such a large picture. We'll demo right now. And we can see, just pulling something else into frame, our Xperia Z1 Compact for example. So 4K video, we'll let that refocus and you should really be able to make out the macro functionality on 4K video is stupid. How good is that? Really, so we've got a full HD image effectively, but we've done zoomed in right in on it. So for anyone who's a videophile, they'll love that. The sound quality tends to be really good unless you've got very heavy gusty wind, and you can attach an external Sony microphone onto here as well for much better quality. You've got time shift video, which activates slow-mo as would an iPhone 5S. So if we pull something into frame like so, we can stop it and we can slow-mo an element of that video. It's going to give a suggested range to slow-mo, and you've got the speed at which it slow-mos as well, and we can play that through. You can see slowed our audio, and then when it gets out of that, it gets back to regular speed. So really easy user interface to get your head around and a lot of fun. So we don't want to save those changes. Jump back, background defocus, we can demo quickly, take a picture of Pedro. So it takes multiple pictures across multiple focal ranges. You can see it's pretty much nailed the fact you've got a blurry background and a sharp foreground. We can dictate the extent to which that's blurred out. You can have horizontal linear blur, vertical linear blur, or radial blur as well. If we stick with that radial blur image, we can zoom in on elements to show you that this effect isn't absolutely perfect. If we were to zoom in on the corner, it hasn't managed to blur out the edges of our BTEC logo, but for the most part, especially if we were to do something like crop into his face, that looks like a perfectly good blurred out image. Jumping out of that, and you can also see AR effects. We've done an AR effect montage for you, so you can see every effect on show, but we're just going to show you Fairy Tale quickly. We can see it's set up an entire scene. We can pull in closer into frame on one of these creepy little creatures, and we can jump out of that and jump into creative effects. Creative effects has probably seen one of the biggest overhauls. Firstly, the user interface looks awesome. You've got a whole load of effects. We're not going to go through all of them. They range from more traditional creative effects like brightness and contrast. The settings that you can actually tweak in these creative effects are really extensive, very nice and subjective. So you've got brightness and you've got contrast, and you can toggle both with one fell swoop. You've also got some really fun additions to some of the creative effects. Mosaic, for example. If we jump in, we can see you've got a range of mosaic options. We can either have very, very big mosaic blocks or small mosaic blocks. Colorful, so it's kind of like the blurred out. And you can also have pointillist style type mosaic blocks. And again, with smaller sizes, you can get a really nice image. And of course, you can go right tiny there. And we can imagine this might be a lot of fun if you're with friends, if you're a teenager and you get this phone. It's just a really, really nice addition to an already ram-packed camera user interface. Moving on, Vine is recording straight into Vine. Info Eye tells you about things you take pictures of. Time shift burst we've seen before. In one shot, 1 second, we can take 60 pictures. There you go. So that just took 60 pictures right there. And jump out of that. And scroll down. Social Live allows you to broadcast whatever you take a picture of. Sweet Panorama takes just that, a sweet panorama. And Evernote sends us straight to Evernote. So that's a camera across video and photo. As far as photo quality goes, pictures look great. Saturation's on point. Focus is incredibly good, especially with macro. You also have really nice detail despite the fact you're only shooting 8 megapixel pictures by default. And on top of that, it has a strong flash. It isn't quite as strong as the HTC One, nowhere near as strong as the Nokia Lumia 1020, but it's still a very solid performer. Video is also great. Aside from the fact you can shoot 4K video and thereby future-proof your videos, you can also shoot full HD. It records impeccable sound unless there is direct wind into the mic, and like we said, you can always stick an external mic in there. The remainder of the multimedia experience is fantastic. You can see the screen looks great when watching videos on it. Netflix app, Spotify app, you can get your media onto here very easily. Sony also has their own services, music and video unlimited as well. Thanks to the audio quality from the speakers, you don't even need to plug your cans in, but if you do, you can plug in these noise cancelling cans to block out 98% of background noise. Some of the phones are going to, some of the boxes of the Xperia Z2 will have these in the box depending on the promotional offer you get. Some won't. We definitely recommend considering them, at least trying them out. They're really, really good. And they do a decent job of cancelling out noise, which no other phone on the market does at the moment. They're also optimized for Michael Jackson's new album, so any hardcore Michael Jackson fans, you guys may want to check it out too. As far as gaming goes on it, you've also got fantastic performance across the board. The fact the stereo speakers are up top and bottom means when you hold this thing like a gamepad, you are not going to be blocking out the noise like you were on past Xperia devices and you do on an iPhone, for example. You've got the latest quad-core processor in here, so whether it's a fighting game, a 3D racer, or a simple platformer, this will be perfectly suited to it. That brings us on to performance, and with the 3 GB of RAM on here and Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 processor clocked at 2.3 GHz, we had absolutely no issues in terms of performance. Thumbing through the user interface and everything was just silky smooth across the board. Also full HD videos, whether you're watching it on the native player or MX player for additional codec support, played back brilliantly. And all in all, the only issue we had was that overheating, and it's exclusive to the camera and only when you record long 4K video, which we don't think you'd probably end up doing all that much. And if you record with creative filters turned on for a long time or AR effects, or at least that was our experience. And again, these aren't things that we would expect you to do on a regular basis, if at all. We just did them for review purposes. So all in all, performance, very, very big thumbs up. And you also have a fantastic array of connections. You don't have USB 3 charging, you don't have wireless charging as well. And on top of that, there isn't any IR blaster on this thing like there is on other flagships, but everything else is on here. Expandable up to 128 GB by micro SD card, M8 shell connection via the USB, and you've also got Wi-Fi direct, Bluetooth 4.0 that is, as well as GPS, etc. Sony also supplements all the connection options with their own connection options too. So if we jump into the settings, we can see Xperia connectivity, one touch setup. You've also got screen mirroring. This throws whatever's going on your screen to an Xperia TV. DualShock 3 support, so you can even play games on here using a DualShock 3 controller. This is pretty much nailing it across the board, but the last hurdle is battery life. So how does the 3200 milliamp cell fare? Well, it fares fantastically. Where the HTC One and Samsung Galaxy S5 died after a day, the Sony Xperia Z2 with its much larger capacity actually goes on to about 2 days. If you've got it on full brightness and you're using it incredibly heavily, you will still get a full day out of this thing. If you use it moderately, you'll get 2 days out of it. And if you activate some of the power saving modes, like battery stamina mode, for example, or the additional power management modes that you can opt for, you can get at least 3 days out of it, especially with light to moderate use, if not more, which is practically unheard of for a modern day smartphone. There are some other power saving options like low battery mode, location based Wi-Fi as well, and you can also queue background data so it uploads and downloads at regular intervals. So there you have it, the Sony Xperia Z2. It could well be the best smartphone in the world for you right now. It's got a beautiful display, front facing speakers, a really clean, elegant user interface, a fantastic screen, and of course that water resistant chassis, not to mention an incredibly powerful processor and more RAM than the competition. Sure, the battery isn't removable like the Samsung Galaxy S5 5, but it will last a whole lot longer, and it may not have quite the premium finish of the HTC One, and the speakers might not be quite as on point, but they are very good, and it still looks like an expensive phone. Hopefully you've enjoyed our review. If you have, click the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more of the same. Make sure you head over to btech.com. Over there you can find the latest in smartphones, tablets, smart gadgets, and some awesome deals as well.
At the top of the screen is where you can find 3 hand-picked videos for your viewing pleasure. On the left is where you can subscribe, and on the right hand side you can find some exclusive deals if you head over to btech.com.